oil company in the world after the Saudis. Now, Rosneft is famous for incompetence when it comes to technical operations. Most of the money has come from BP. Most of the sales have gone to BP. Most of the work has been done by BP, and most of the technology has come from BP. And last week, or earlier this week, I'm sorry, my time is all over the place. I haven't gotten a lot of sleep in 8 days. BP was the first major investor to call it quits and say they're going to leave. Now, that will not generate an instant production fall, but on average, foreign companies, Western companies specifically, operating in Russia are probably responsible for producing and maintaining half of all of Russian output. So even if the pipes don't have a problem, even if crude tankers do keep coming, even if the Europeans never even if the Europeans never sanction the Russians, even if the protests stop, even if the partisans never target infrastructure, we are still looking at Russian output falling by roughly half. The question is the time frame, and that's going to vary greatly project to project. But as a rule, if the project was brought online in the last 10 years, the Russians had no idea how to do it, because those are going to be deeper fields, smaller fields, more remote fields, more technically challenging fields. So this output build that we have seen over the last 15 years, the vast majority of that is because of BP. It's also because of the 3 companies at the bottom. The services firms, excuse me, are not covered by the sanctions, and at present, none of the 3 have decided to pull out. I expect this to be the next big target for American sanctions specifically. Biden has made it very clear and very public that his goal is to destroy Russia as an energy superpower. And as long as these 3 companies are operating there, that will not happen. All 3 companies look to the United States more than they look to Europe. So if the Americans do start pressuring the 3 of them, it will work, and we will see a much faster decline in what the Russians are able to do. Final player, of course, is Gazprom. If it deals with natural gas, and if it's a legacy field, Gazprom's okay. But if it deals with anything that's a vertical deposit, if it's an offshore deposit, if it's a shale deposit, if it's in Siberia, if it's in the permafrost, Gazprom is probably one of the 10 least competent state companies on the planet, and most of their legacy production dates to fields that were developed 40 years ago. And so without Baker Hughes and Schlumberger and Halliburton, Gazprom's output for gas would fall much faster than Rosneft's output for oil. So no matter how this plays out, we're looking at catastrophic reductions in Russia's output, even without sanctions. You throw sanctions in on the services companies, it goes really, really quick. Not to be left out, East Asia is also in play. The Sakhalin projects are offshore in moving ice zones, in areas that get high winds and variable weathers and changing sea currents. It's the most technically challenging operating environment in the world. And if it wasn't for Exxon and Shell leading up the Sakhalin 1 and the Sakhalin 2 projects, they would have never happened. In terms of dollars invested per oil back, they're the most expensive projects in the world. And bit by bit, over the last 20 years, the Russian state has forced Exxon and Shell to give up incremental percentages of ownership to the point that they're now minority holders, even though they are still the operators. The companies that they're partnered with, whether it's Gazprom or Rosneft or out of Japan, Mitsui and Mitsubishi, they have no idea how to operate these fields. So this week, Exxon and Shell both announced that they're walking away completely. They, like BP, know they will not get a single cent in recompense for these operations. And whereas BP can at least hand over the operations to Rosneft, for Rosneft to preside over its general decline, Exxon and Shell, because of the nature of the work here and the technical nature of the work, are going to shut it down completely. So we are looking here at about another 350,000 barrels of crude and about 3 BCF of natural gas that's going to vanish from the market in the first half of this year because the remaining players simply can't operate it, much less expand it. Based on who you are, this is a different kind of disaster. What we've got here is a crude quality chart. So the farther to the left you are, the thicker and heavier your crude. The farther to the right, the more it's like nail polish. More to the top, you're dealing with things that have very few contaminants. More to the bottom, you get crusty sulfur and mercury creeping into the system. Now, I've highlighted three things here. First of all, Urals is in the bottom right quadrant. It's a mild sour, mild heavy crude. The reason this matters is that it's all the same. The Russians blend all, they don't have a separate system for different crude blends. Everything gets put into the network. So when it comes out, it's just kind of this melange of everything. And this is roughly where it matches on there. Now, that means that refiners who have used Urals crude find it fairly reliable. Leaving aside the geopolitics for a moment, the Russian system has allowed refiners the world over to, what's the word I'm looking for, to tune their system so that they are able to run the same thing. I'm having a hard time phrasing this. It's a reliability issue. Each crude is different, and you can make different crude derived products with it. And if you can get the same crude that your refinery is tuned to, you're going to get much better throughput results. There we go. Wow, that was hard. Urals being the world's single largest crude grade by volume. A lot of people have tuned their refineries for it. And now that it is vanishing, they're going to have to figure out a different way to operate. There are other mild, sour, mild, heavy crudes. Most of them come out of Iraq and Iran, a little bit out of Saudi Arabia. So it's not like it's a death blow, but now you're looking at people trying to replace 5 million barrels of throughput with a different input stream, all at the same time. For comparison, up in the top left, you can see that the blues, those are US shale crudes. Because US shale is basically broken out of the rock and it's never had a chance to migrate through the rock formation and pick up contaminants, it's super light and super sweet. CPC blend out of Tengiz is very similar in that regard.